Hey everyone, Duke here, and today we're going over the final Master Challenge in Crota's End, all for one. This challenge is for the Crota encounter and is very simple conceptually. You'll have to take down Crota's shield all in one go. In order to do this, you will want to have 3 sword bearers all attack Crota at the same time. As with the other challenges, I'll be doing helps for this challenge on my stream multiple times this week at twitch.tv/dukeiscool, so come on by if you have any questions or want a chance to run. Before we get into encounter tips, let's talk about loadout tips. For DPS, swords are a great go-to option, with Lament being great as it can additionally be used for a bit of added survivability due to its built-in sustain, but a lot of it's going to come down to the weekly surges. Picking a sword that matches one of the weekly surges will give you a free 25% damage boost, with any damage perks on the sword itself increasing your damage further. 2 boot surges for your damage weapon of choice will increase your damage by an additional 17%. I'd recommend recuperation in the final slot here for additional survivability versus a 3rd weapon surge. You'll absolutely want to make use of arc resist mods on your chest piece, as the knights, thralls, wizards, and Crota himself will all be shooting high amounts of arc damage. One concussive dampener can assist with the AoE that many of these mobs will additionally bring. Loosened Blades is a mod that can be very effective with swords, but being in this all-important chest piece slot makes it not worthwhile in my opinion compared to the survival benefits that we just talked about. That being said, if you feel extremely comfortable surviving and want to put a little extra into DPS, it is certainly a beneficial mod. Along the same lines of survivability, make sure to have 100 resilience. There's no more impactful stat in the game when it comes to doing these difficult challenges, as the #1 thing that causes failed runs is lack of being alive. I've said it before and I'll say it again, a dead guardian does no damage, and it's even worse in this encounter as losing an enlightened or sword player at the wrong time can potentially just immediately be a wipe. A way to stun unstoppable champions is going to be required on Master, as the 2 ogres that spawn in are now going to be unstoppable champions every time. Fusion rifles are great for unstops this season and are my special weapon of choice normally on this encounter anyway. Heavy ammo is going to be at a premium as well, as you really aren't going to want to run out for multiple DPS phases. 1 player on Tractor Cannon to debuff Crota by 30% will be helpful, and this player running Aeons to finish the Unstoppables, as well as Swordbearer, can make heavy for your team. Additionally, a Warlock with Cenotaph Mask and the Trace Rifle of your choice can also make heavy for your team on these same enemies. The Elemental Munitions mod, along with the corresponding Elemental Orbs mod for your class, can additionally help in creating extra ammo throughout this encounter, especially on some of the smaller adds. And finally, don't forget about Monochromatic Maestro for some extra damage, mainly if it pairs well with one of the weekly surges. I wouldn't go out of your way to use Monochromatic, as it's only a short-term 10% damage buff versus the 25% of the weekly surge that is always active, but if you can get both, that's a huge W. Now that we've gone over some loadout tips, let's talk about encounter flow and strategy. As mentioned previously, the challenge is to take down Crota's shield all at once, using the sword bearer's swords. In order to accomplish this, you're going to want to get 3 sword users all at once. I'd recommend enlightening 5 total players, with the 6th player preserving the chalice. The first 3 players in this order will be your assigned sword users, and the 5th player is going to be your oversoul breaker. You're definitely going to want to play safe and play your life once you have Enlightened, and especially once you have a sword, as you really don't want to lose either of these things, but we will have a backup plan just in case someone does go down. The 4th player in the rotation is a backup for everything. If an Enlightened player dies, they can step in to pick up a sword. If your Oversoul Breaker dies, they can become the new Oversoul player. If everything goes to plan, they use their Enlightened buff to expunge Crota during DPS for some extra damage. It's a win-win-win. Do note that to take best advantage of this player, I'd recommend that they don't expunge Crota until around 10 seconds on the Oversoul timer, as this will allow some extra time to make sure the main Oversoul player doesn't die at the start of the phase. This isn't necessary, but this challenge is going to be all about having flexibility for mistakes and giving yourself the best chance to make up for situations without being forced to wipe. As always, everyone's #1 priority is going to be switching the chalice on time if you are either the current or the next chalice holder. For the other players, especially those who don't have a sword yet, you're going to want to keep the main flow of adds of the encounter going. If you aren't already aware, when all 4 Boomer Knights, 2 in each tower, die, the Swordbearer and 2 Ogres will spawn in. Again, these are now Unstoppables in Master. Focus down these 2 Unstoppable Ogres immediately before anything else, and then take down the Swordbearer. Make sure that if using a finisher or really any movement tech and you're about to pick up the sword, that you wait a second before picking up the sword, as there is a known glitch throughout this raid that can cause you to use your Enlighten buff, but not actually pick up the sword if interacting with it too fast after either using a finisher or again a movement ability. There'll be a few wizards after this, and then you'll want to head back to the towers to kill the boomers again. One tip for passing the chalice is to really be aware of where Crota is at any given time. You can potentially have someone bait him a little bit and kind of keep the aggro when you possibly can. I don't think it's something that you necessarily need to assign someone to, but that can be helpful. But really just keep an eye as the person either currently holding the chalice or the next person where Crota is. Make sure you know where that is. If you are a Titan, barricades are extremely strong, placing one up in terms of being able to block basically between you and where Crota is on the point where you're going to need to be passing the chalice. Rifts can also help, but I wouldn't necessarily count on a rift keeping you alive fully. Those barricades definitely can. And I'd also recommend to not just be standing on the point way before you need to pass it. Like if you're at like 50%, don't be standing there. Just like stand close, don't be halfway across the map, but don't be standing on the point and drawing all the fire from Crota, fire from other enemies directly onto where you're going to have to stand here in a few seconds. Wait until you're at 90+% or even maybe the chalice completely full, and then move on to the point, tell the person to grab, and you're going to be a lot safer. One final tip for the flow here is to really prioritize the chalice swaps near the end of the rotation. As you have more people holding swords, you're going to have less guns on the field to deal with adds, especially the unstoppable ogres. Making sure to get a chalice pass off before taking down the boomers, so that you can have your full focus on then taking down the unstops, is a much better plan than spawning in the ogres right as two players are needing to swap their chalice, which then takes even more people out of position to be able to deal with these threatening enemies. For DPS itself, you're going to want multiple Well of Radiances. Going back to the crystal room to get set up and then letting Crota rotate towards you will allow you to get set up, and then having your tractor cannon player lead the way to tractor Crota right before the swords come in will allow the swords to do more damage and make taking down his shield no problem. Additionally, having a Well of Radiance dropped right as you're going in, whether this is the tractor cannon player themselves or a different non-sword user, will reduce any risk of death to start. As the DPS phase goes longer and longer, watch out for Crota moving around or potentially breaking a well to then place a new one. Healing rifts with Boots of the Assembler can also be helpful if you find Crota moving around significantly for additional survivability. Things like staggering Crota or placing a well on his head are possible, but focusing on just this main strategy is the most important thing. As the tractor cannon and oversoul player, I like to make sure to get one last tractor shot on Crota at around 5 seconds, and then make sure I'm in position to hit the oversoul safely. At around 3 seconds, I'll shoot my 2 fusion rifle shots to break the oversoul. As mentioned earlier, fusion rifles, mainly faster firing ones, are already great for general ad clear, and as an unstoppable option for this season, and they additionally make breaking the oversoul a breeze, while also providing some decent additional DPS in between using your tractor. Do be alert to not shoot towards the oversoul as this player with a fusion rifle though. The shots can very easily accidentally break the oversoul and make you lose out on a large portion of your DPS, so always be watching the angle of your DPS when you're shooting with the fusion rifle while waiting for the oversoul timer. For final stand, nothing's really going to change. I would recommend saving any damage supers and a well for whenever you plan on pushing the boss, and it may be better to wait for a third phase in some cases if you're going to be really low on ammo or supers by forcing a push on the second phase. Again, as the oversoul player, wait till about 3 seconds on the timer to break the oversoul, and extend the additional 10 seconds, and then focus all of your damage on Crota. And that's all for today. I hope my video to the Master Crota Challenge was helpful, and don't forget to come by stream this week if you're interested in running, or have any questions and want to see more. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.